Building a better Bay Area. Moving forward, finding solutions. This is ABC 7 News.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Dion Lim, and you are watching Getting Answers, and we are live on ABC 7, Hulu Live, and wherever you stream. Basically, what we do is we ask experts your questions every day at 3 o'clock to get you answers in real time. Now, we have a jam-packed show for you today. We are starting with Dr. Alok Patel, but we also have David Bond with Blue Shield of California to talk about mental health during the holidays. Dr. Patel is part of our ABC 7 News vaccine team, and he's joining us now to talk about coronavirus and more specifically the Omicron variant. Before we dive into the very latest developments, we are starting with the game of two truths and a lie. Bada bing, bada boom. And I should point out that you are actually traveling for the holidays. That's why you're not like in your car or in your regular digs today.
That is, Dion. I am traveling right now, which we can get later, how I made sure that I and everyone around me was safe during travel. But that's also why I have a janky phone or earpod cord coming out of my ear right now and not looking like my usual audio tech swagger. So I apologize for that.
Wow, I wish I had audio tech swagger. That's like next level stuff. I mean, just a pro tip, Dr. Patel, make sure you have an extra one of these when you travel in your suitcase.
That's swagger. That is swagger.
All right, let's get to our game right now. Basically, for anybody who has not played, what you do is you try and figure out which are the truths, which are the lies. So take it away.
Dion, you're in the hot seat. So everyone out there, tell me which one of these headlines is not true. Looking from the top, is it A, early studies suggest Paxlovid, Pfizer's antiviral pill, is likely to work against the Omicron variant with an EUA expected soon? Or is it B, while Omicron can evade antibodies, lab data suggests T cells still recognize and respond to the variant? Or is it C, a showing of Chicago on Broadway was canceled after the audience was already in their seats?
Oh boy.
Which one of these is not true?
Okay, this is a lot to unload. So I want everybody to take a moment, look at your screen. If you are joining us on Facebook, please let us know your response, your answer to which are the truths, which is the lie. Full disclosure, I was talking with our executive producer, Heather, and as we were going through these questions, Dr. Patel, she thinks this is a little bit two truths and a typo because it's so specific what the lie is.
Whoa, two truths and a typo? All right.
But we are not.
I might get schooled. I may have mistyped something. And I might find out later. But anyway, do you have a final answer? We can go from there.
Okay. I want to say I heard about what happened on Broadway. So that to me makes a lot of sense. I'm going to go with B and C. While Omicron can evade antibodies, lab data suggests T cells still recognize and respond to the variant. So B and C, I think, are the truths.
You're doing it backwards. I like that. So you think A is the lie?
Yeah, I think so, because I hadn't heard much about Paxlovid. Is that how you pronounce it?
That's how I pronounce it.
Well, if you say it's okay, then I'm going to go with what Dr. Patel says.
So,
but is that right?
So A and B are actually true. And I will say to everyone out there that this is a good thing that these are true. It is important to know that we have therapeutics such as antiviral pills coming to market, and Pfizer did put out a statement saying like, hey, not only does this pill reduce hospitalizations and deaths by a large degree, over 80% of people, it's expected to respond to the Omicron variant because it's targeting a different part of the virus. I won't get into the microbiology there. B is also important. We've been saying this, Dion, for a while, that antibodies are just one arm of the immune system, and T cells are still able to recognize part of that variant. This was done in a lab, so we need to confirm this with real-world data, but this should be reassuring everyone out there. Now, the reason why C is false is because it was a showing of Moulin Rouge and not Chicago. This is not a typo. This is called me being very mean and making sure that we were tricky and entertaining.
Wow, talk about the holiday spirit. You're going to get coal in your stocking, Dr. Patel, with that type of question.
Hey, if it's coal at the expense of invigorating and adding some edutainment to the program, then coal me all day.
Edutainment. I like that. And by the way, want to give a shout out to Randy, who guessed B, Erica, who guessed C. So ding, ding, ding. The prize goes to you, Erica Stafford. Thank you so much for joining in on Facebook.com/ABC7News. And by the way, the reason why I picked A is because I remember early in the pandemic, there were talks of all of these different drugs and how there really wasn't a lot of data proving that they helped fight the virus.
There wasn't. And, it's important to know that there are a whole host of drugs out there, and some of them have been touted as miracle cures, if you will, because people on Twitter might be supporting the use of them. And we saw all the drama regarding hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin. And, Dion, one thing that not only irritates me personally, but just goes against science is people pushing a narrative that we are against therapeutics for COVID-19, and we don't want to find a way to treat patients. That couldn't be farther from the truth. We just want to see clear-cut data that these therapeutics and these treatments actually work. And this is not just related to, antiviral pills or monoclonal antibodies, but also with vaccines. And, we can talk about what we saw today with the Pfizer data regarding 2 to 5-year-olds, but we are not going to push anything on our patients that we ourselves would not take or we wouldn't give to our own family members.
Yeah, we will get to the 2 to 5-year-olds and the Pfizer a little bit later on in the show. But yeah, just give the man some data. I know you've been tweeting about it. And if you haven't followed him already, give everybody a shout out what your Twitter handle is, because it is quite entertaining and educational.
It's at Alok Patel MD. Pretty easy to remember.
Okay, let's get to some of the questions, because we want to take it back to something local with Marin and Sonoma counties. They're reporting Omicron cases today, and that means it's been detected in, count them, 5 Bay Area counties now. I mean, it feels like it was only a matter of time. Did you foresee this happening?
And I'm not alone in foreseeing it happening. We definitely we thought this was going to happen. When we first reported on that first case in California, we were not really at the level of genomic surveillance as other places. And so this takes us back to previous variants, the start of the pandemic. When you see one case, you say there's likely 10 times that. There likely is community transmission. And Dion, a lot of the data now has come out really showing us that this variant is more transmissible. It is more contagious than the Delta variant. It's likely widespread. It also has that ability to evade some of those previous antibodies and reinfect people. But I think the most important thing that we are not really hammering down is we don't have evidence to say that it is more serious, deadly, or virulent, which, if that holds out, is a very good thing. And it makes it, I don't want to say safer, but it makes it less dangerous than the Delta variant. And so people out there have to understand that right now in the United States, a lot of the deaths, a lot of the hospitalizations are still due to the Delta variant.
Yeah, and you actually took some of the words out of my mouth, because that was my next question, because I read this study coming out of London and it sounded alarming. At least the headline was alarming. So keep in mind, these are early findings, like you said, and it basically says that Omicron could spread 2 to 3 times faster than the Delta variant, not to mention the risk of being reinfected is more than 5 times higher than the risk of being reinfected with Delta. I was under the assumption early on, when we first heard about Omicron in Africa, that it was actually not as severe and that people who were infected were not going to have to be hospitalized like we saw with Delta.
Well, those both could be true, Dion. You can have a virus that is doubling every 2 to 3 days, that is rapidly spreading, that is able to reinfect people, but then also have it be less severe. And that would actually be the ideal scenario. If we're going to have a variant that is going to outcompete Delta, we would obviously want it to be a less serious version of the virus. Now, if we just look at South Africa and we look at some of the data that's come out from there, we see that hospitalization rates overall are actually down in comparison to the peak during the Delta wave. Hospitalizations with kids are actually up, unfortunately, but a lot of those kids have mild to moderate symptoms. There's even some reports that these kids have tested positive, and that isn't their primary reason for being in the hospital. So we have based a lot of our data on these populations who have gotten Omicron, young, healthy. Some of them have previous vaccinations, and that means that they may have fought off the Omicron variant a little bit better. And I say all this because I would caution people from just making a broad assumption and saying, hey, Omicron is no big deal, because we don't really know how people who are not yet vaccinated, people who are high risk, or young children are going to fare against it. But I have my fingers crossed that it's going to be less severe while we get on top of our vaccination and treatment efforts.
Yeah, I like your optimism, as it has always been during this pandemic. I want to take a moment right now to recognize Scott Shelp, who is writing to us on Facebook and says, what if the solution to the COVID-19 pandemic is COVID-19? If a coronavirus variant emerges that doesn't cause much more than a head cold, but gives the infected person antibodies against all COVID strains like Omicron, then could that be a natural vaccine that spreads? Interesting question.
It is an interesting question. And the hard reality is we don't know actually, if that would be the reality. We don't know for a fact if, hey, Omicron is going to spread. All that's going to happen is you're going to get a head cold. You will have no long COVID. You will not cause any problems if you transmit it. People who are elderly or have weakened immune systems will have no issue at all. And you will have long, durable, natural immunity. There's a lot of what ifs there, Dion. There's a lot of asterisks. And so it's very hard to kind of say that. Now, I will say that natural immunity is absolutely a real thing. It's just very difficult to quantify it from person to person. We have studies showing that people who previously recovered from COVID-19, not only should they still go and get a vaccine, but after that, when they have this hybrid immunity, if you want to call it that, they're even more protected against COVID-19 than people who were not exposed in the past and went and got vaccinated. And so I don't think it's a reason out there to not get vaccinated. In fact, you absolutely should, because remember, Delta is still what's wreaking all the havoc. But sure, if Omicron were to spread and be less virulent and give people natural immunity, there would be a little bit of a silver lining there.
Okay, well, I think that's a good way to address that. Thank you for asking that question. Vivian Sam, before we get on with the next one, wants to know, Omicron being more transmissible, does that also relate to it hanging longer in the air? Curious about it dissipating outside. I think that's a great question, especially as people continue to have outdoor gatherings and do outdoor dining.
From everything I've read, it has more to do with its ability to kind of latch onto cells in the body and how quickly it can replicate. In fact, there was one study showing that it's able to replicate about 70 times faster than the Delta variant in a certain part of your lung tissue. And, that just goes to show about the virus itself, the virus's machinery versus what it's able to do in the environment. But that's a really good question, because we may learn later about something this virus is able to do in the air on surfaces. And that takes us back to the beginning of 2020, when we weren't sure how long SARS-CoV-2 was able to survive in the air, if it really was airborne, how ventilation affected it, and all that.
I remember that, the rush to get air purifiers, among other protective measures. All right, we do have to take a quick break on the air right now, but ABC 7 News continues getting answers at 3 o'clock on Facebook and also on our YouTube, so make sure to check it out, and we'll see you on TV in just a second. All right, we are in commercial break. Want to take a couple more questions while we're here, Dr. Patel?
Let's party.
Okay, wow, right on. It looks like Dr. Fauci is right. Today he said an Omicron surge is inevitable. I mean, gotta listen to Dr. Fauci, right? I mean, I'm not surprised by this.
And no one is surprised by the fact that a surge is inevitable. We've already talked about the fact that it's more transmissible, that it can infect people who were previously infected, but also it's winter. People are gathering indoors. There's a setup for the virus to actually go and infect people. And also what's kind of scary is there's some PCR tests out there that are not actually detecting the Omicron variant. And so it's important that the FDA is updating this list so people know what tests to take. And so some people will go out there and be bold and say, listen, every single person is going to get COVID at some point. And there is some truth to that. Everyone at some point in time is going to run into this virus. And what it comes down to is if you're prepared, if your body's prepared against it. And that's honestly what the best thing people can do right now, because there is no zero risk game. Yeah. There's no point in time, I suspect, where we're going to just see zero cases. It's here.
Yeah. And can I ask you, while we're in the commercial break, we'll talk a little bit more when we return, but when you decided to travel, did you take some extra precautions? I know you're double vaxxed, maybe triple vaxxed at this point, right?
I'm calling it, listen, I'm going to be ahead of the CDC right now. I'm calling it fully vaxxed, meaning I've had my 2 shots and I've had a 3rd shot. I think it's only a matter of time before the language changes and we just call it fully vaccinated, being all 3 shots. But the other precautions we take is we have masks, we have KN95s, we have antigen tests. You can get them over the counter just in case we get exposed. We want to take them before seeing my parents. We take all the necessary precautions. And I think some of these precautions we're going to keep doing in the post-pandemic future, including wearing a mask on planes. Why not?
To be honest with you, I recently flew to Los Angeles for an event, and it was kind of reassuring knowing that people weren't going to be coughing all over you, getting you sick in other ways. So
I agree.
I get it. All right, we are about 10 seconds away, so we will get
10
back
seconds
with
is
you.
enough time for me to say congratulations to you, by the way, for what you went to Los Angeles for.
Oh, thank you, thank you. More on that in a moment. All right, thanks everybody for sticking around for ABC 7 News' Getting Answers at 3 o'clock. Joining us right now, once again, Dr. Alok Patel, our vaccine and all things coronavirus expert. Let's get right into the questions once again, because this came out from the government today, that when it comes to case rates of people in their 30s, they have the highest infection rate of any group. So what exactly is going on here? At first I thought maybe 30-somethings mingle more, but that would also put people in their 20s in that same category. So why do you think these results are like this?
This is an educated guess, but I think it's a combination of factors, including what you mentioned. It's possible that 20, 30-somethings are out more, not necessarily just mingling more, they're traveling more, they're going back to in-person work, anything like that, where there is a potential for them to catch this. But also we have to look at who was eligible for the vaccine first and how it rolled out in this country. So who is most likely to be at that point where those antibodies are waning to a degree, the 6-month mark? And it's possible that people who are a little bit older, people who are working in any type of essential services are the ones who are eligible for the vaccine faster. And unfortunately, not everyone out there who is eligible for a booster or a third shot has gone out and gotten it. So I think it's a multitude of factors. And part of it is the fact that we are dealing with a much more transmissible variant than before.
Yeah. Speaking of, Heather Morley writes in to ask, can Omicron mutate into a deadlier variant?
I think theoretically, and again, I'm going to just be open about this and say I am not a microbiology expert in terms of studying how the viruses themselves mutate, but from what all my colleagues who have said is that if we give the virus more chances to replicate and mutate, it is possible we could see a more deadly strain. That is exactly what happened with Delta, which was extremely deadly. So when people say, going back to what we said earlier, with someone saying, why don't we just let Omicron spread? Well, because guess what? If you let the virus spread, it will continue to mutate. Yep. And the last thing we want to see is another deadlier variant.
I'm not a doctor, and that certainly makes a lot of sense to me. That would have been my guess as well. Speaking of boosters, I know Bay Area health officials today, they sent out a message urging everyone to get their booster shot. I mean, we've been hearing this for months now, boosters, boosters, boosters. But when it comes to Omicron, how big of a difference do you think that third shot makes?
And this isn't even think. This is based on data that is out there in terms of how much that third shot is going to ramp up those antibody levels and how it's estimated to really boost up the efficacy against symptomatic COVID-19, even with the Omicron variant, to a high level, almost close to what it was before with Delta. And that's important to know for people is that, hey, it's possible that in due time, we're going to find out that the optimal way to create that long-lasting protection is 3 shots. So there is no doubt right now. I don't see any controversy about the fact that people who are out there who may be running into coronavirus, especially those who are higher risk, those who live with someone who's higher risk, those who may be exposed, should absolutely go out and get a third shot.
Yeah, lots of questions coming in about boosters and being safe during those holiday gatherings. I mean, for you, I'm just curious, did you get all of your family members on board with getting fully vaxxed?
Absolutely. And fortunately, I didn't have to really do a lot of persuasion. Everyone always has one vaccine hesitant uncle or one anti-vax cousin, and that's okay. It's important to have the conversations, be respectful, be compassionate, and if you can, find a safe plan for everyone. And that may mean different things for different families, different situations, different parts of the country. We all were very open about vaccine status, testing status, exposure, what we're going to do, what does ventilation look like. And this has changed throughout the course of the pandemic. We have other friends who might be meeting up with us as well. You have to have the same dialogue with these people also. Yeah. It's very important. People are doing almost their own version of potential contact tracing, which is what we should have been doing since day one.
Yeah, having those really tough sometimes conversations. My mom, by the way, this is how she handled it, true story, had my dad take the vaccine first to see how he would react. And then she realized he didn't die, he didn't get sick, it was totally safe. So now we're on 2 and 3 for her. So goes to show sometimes it, whatever it takes for family members, those family dynamics.
Dion, thanks for sharing that, because I think that's important. People understand out there that everyone has their own journey. Everyone has their own mechanism to building trust. And it's important that we don't block out those conversations. And if you have to have a difficult conversation with someone, take some time to listen and just hear them out first and find that common ground.
Yeah, a lot of it's psychology during this time. All right, we only have 1 minute left, but I do have to get to this because you mentioned it earlier. Pfizer already looking at a third shot for kids 5 years old and older because of immunity concerns. You're a pediatrician. What is your take on this? Is it a setback? I heard that, we were hoping for some more vaccines for kids by the end of the year, but that's not going to happen.
It is a setback. It's a setback because there's a lot of people out there, not only pediatricians, public health officials, but parents of these 2 to 5-year-olds who are looking forward to getting their kids protected. And now not only do we need to wait for more data to confirm that it's going to give a good, adequate immune response, but it could potentially be until the second quarter in 2022 before we see that data come forward. Because if anyone out there hasn't seen, Pfizer basically said, hey, the immune response didn't mount up to what we wanted to be. We only gave 1/10 the dose in that age population compared to what they gave in adults. So they're going to try a third dose to look to see if it kind of ramps it up. And, in a different way, younger kids than that's 6 months to 2 years, showed a good response. So I think the public is going to want to see a lot more data. We're going to have to work on that conversation with parents, and everyone out there should understand and see this as an example that we will not push a vaccine or advocate for any treatment out there if the data isn't crystal clear. So even though this is a setback, I stand by it because we want a vaccine to not only be safe, but actually to make sure it works.
I appreciate your honesty. I appreciate your bold messaging that, yes, it is all about that data, and the data does not lie. Dr. Alok Patel, always thank you for joining us, no matter where you happen to be in the country.
Dion, thank you.
Okay, we will be right back with an expert on monitoring your mental health during the holidays. Stay with us. The show continues on Facebook.com/ABC7 News. Okay. All right, thanks everybody for tuning in. I know that we had a lot of great questions. I should just let you know that, so you know what I see on my computer, the questions continue to scroll and I cannot always scroll back up to get them. So I'm trying to get them for you in real time. Shout out to Labkand, who says he and his son have been vaccinated. Just wanted to share that as well. Dane wants to know, can the testing swab have a harmful chemical on it? I am not an expert. The testing swab, I believe, is sealed up, but that will be a question that I'll try and get to with Dr. Patel next time he is on our show. So a quick reminder and a quick water break as well. We are also on YouTube, and I want to make sure I get this messaging right. I don't always do this show, but basically we have Facebook Watch and a YouTube link. And on YouTube, I'm going to click that. So if anybody is tuning in there, I can get to some of your questions. Show less here. Okay. Let me see. Yeah, and if you want to ask right now our mental health expert about the holidays and kind of dealing with that anxiety, dealing with that stress, because of course it is a time when we are expected to be joyous. We are with friends and family, but on the other hand, it can be exceptionally overwhelming. And personally, I'd like to ask our expert about the comparisons that I think we all tend to make at the end of the year as we reflect back on the past year, the challenges we've had. So make sure to stick with that. Karen, thank you so much. I see, Karen says, I see Alok get your vax Patel, but no other one. Oh, we have another guest coming up right now. Here we go, 10 seconds away.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5 seconds, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back, everybody. Okay, we are in the home stretch before Christmas, and like every year, along with celebrating the season, there is holiday stress. I know you know what I'm talking about. According to the American Psychological Association, get this, almost 40% of us experience some kind of exhaustion, stress, and anxiety. The National Alliance on Mental Illness also found almost 2/3 of people with a mental illness say the holidays make their conditions worse. So, to help us get through what should be a merry time of year is our next guest, David Bond. He is a licensed clinical social worker and director of behavioral health at Blue Shield of California. David, welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate being here.
You know, every year I feel like no matter how often we say it, we're going to get a jump start on the holidays, we're going to tackle it, and we're going to own everything. There still seems to be so much to do with so little time. I think for me, that's where that overwhelming feeling comes from. Is that why we have these feelings of anxiety and stress?
Well, there's so much. I mean, it's an overwhelm around the holidays because we set ourselves up with so many expectations for all of the things that we're going to experience. I wouldn't be a therapist if I didn't say that a lot of this comes from our childhood experience. So when you think about it, of course, we're going to have a heightened emotionality around the holidays. And you think about the change in weather, kids getting out of school, the movies that we're watching, all of those things really add into to our expectations. And then, of course, some of the frustrations expectations that come along with that when we expect things to be, even more peaceful than they really are.
That's true. I think we have high expectations for a very Merry Christmas. We're influenced by a lot of media. Maybe we see movies of these very perfect looking families, and not everyone's family is perfect. So I get that. Before we get to our next question, James Allen writes in on Facebook and asks, how do you handle obsessive Christmas disorder with Christmas Day having to be a majority of good? Is there massive disappointment or devastation as if you have lost a loved one? I think what he's asking is, how do you make Christmas Day feel better and not so sad like you are with loved ones at a funeral? A little bit of a dark question, but I think he's trying to ask is, how do you stay upbeat during a time when you're expected to be upbeat and jolly?
Well, there's a real blend there. So many of us have lost someone over the last year, and what happens is, I would say, don't try so hard to not be sad. Being sad or being scared is a part of the full spectrum of human, being human, our emotional experience and our emotional being. The concept is to, I would say, remember two things. First of all, you don't have to feel this way all the time. So when you experience it, know that you will move through things, and there will be another side. And the other piece of it is there is joy to remember as well. So when you're remembering someone and you're sad and you're thinking about that loss, somehow incorporate, I would say, the memories of the parts where you do have gratitude and feelings of love. And there's always that time where you're like, oh, I really miss her. But do you remember that time when she did that thing, and then that was really funny, and then there's the laughter through tears as well. So let yourself have that full experience and find the gratitude and joy where you can.
Yeah, remembering those really good moments. And I think it was said to me many times during the pandemic is that it's okay to be not okay and not have that pressure of needing to be happy, smiley person on television at all times. We only have about a minute, but this is an important question, is how do you approach someone who you think may be struggling? You see your loved ones acting a little bit down. What do you do?
Yeah, I get this question a lot, especially get it from parents who are concerned about their kids. And my advice is usually think about the 3 steps. First, I would make an observation, and then ask a simple question, and then stop talking. And when you stop talking, you have to allow that space for the person to genuinely come with what they're feeling and thinking. Try to keep yourself from giving that person prompts or options with how they might respond. So, are you still mad at me about what happened last week? Are you still mad at grandma? Are you upset about something that happened at school? Don't do that. Just listen, ask the question, because if you give those prompts, you're suggesting what might be the correct answer and what's an acceptable answer to you, but it might not be what's really going on. So make sure that you're actually making the space for the other person to share their real experience.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I personally have had many people ask me something like that, and then I feel very pressured to answer a certain way. David Bond, many thanks to you. Hope we talk to you again soon.
All right. Take care. Thank you.
All right. Stay with us, everybody. We're taking a short break on the air, but David will continue to be with us for the next couple minutes on abc7news.com and facebook.com/abc7news. Okay, we are in the break. If I could ask you one last question, I know you're prepared for this as well, is that when do you feel like maybe a loved one or a friend needs more than just your own listening ear, that they need some professional help? It's a hard conversation to have with someone.
Yeah, sure. So one of the big things to really think about it is to give someone that space. So, and you think about intensity and frequency and duration. So I'll break that one down a little bit. It's normal for someone to have sadness or anger or frustration at a thing that happens. When it's sadness every day or more days than not for a period of like longer than 2 weeks, or if that anxiety is so intense that you really can't tolerate it, and that happens for more days than not for a period of more than 2 weeks, that's when I would really consider, do I really have access to the help with just my circle of friends or my circle of support? Or maybe it's time to talk to a professional, or even not even necessarily a licensed clinician, but there are lots of apps where you might be able to get a hold of someone who's more like a coach or a peer support person.
Yeah, there's so many different ways. I think I saw an ad for an app where you can just hire someone to FaceTime with you. It's really cool.
Yeah, well, there are lots of there are dozens, if not hundreds, of apps like that. I would say something like Ginger or Headspace. Those are two that Blue Shield members all have access to. But if other people have access to those as well, those types of Headspace is one for great meditation to get calmed, to feel grounded in your body, and to be able to sort of move on after something stressful is going on. And Ginger links people up to more peer support coaches, and also they can assess if you need to speak with a therapist, then they can make that referral as well.
Great tips. We only have 20 seconds. I know there's a website you wanted to mention. Is that right?
Oh, absolutely. We'd look at blueshield.com/mentalhealth, and there's lots going on there on the landing page that people can have access to.
Gotta go. Thanks, David. Glad we could get that in. All right, here we go. Thanks so much for joining us for this interactive show, Getting Answers. I'm Dion Lim. World News Tonight is next. This is how we do. On Facebook, please try and find me on social media. I am Dion Lim TV on all the media platforms, and I will see you. I'll be anchoring our ABC 7 News at 4 o'clock. Take care.